Our next speaker is Robert Metz. For those of you who don't know Bob, he has a background in business administration and accounting. Bob has became the founding member of Freedom Party of Ontario in 1984 and has been its president since then. In that capacity, he has found himself in many roles as writer, editor, publisher of FP's numerous publications and newsletters, as a candidate and interim party leader in past elections, and as public spokesman for the party on issues of policy and platform. He's also served as an executive member of many ad hoc taxpayers and lobby groups, including the London Middlesex Taxpayers Coalition, the LMTC, Hold All London Taxes, HALT, and as chair of the No Tax for the 1991 Pan Am Games Committee, whose success saved taxpayers over $110 million. In 1993, he volunteered to act as legal counsel and won the case for Elijah Iliev in London, a landlord accused of discrimination before an Ontario Human Rights Commission. In one of the most controversial cases ever brought before the Commission, and the case continues to have repercussions to this very day. As a matter of fact, it's the first case ever that was won in front of that Ontario Human Rights Commission. And he's not even a lawyer. He's an accountant by trade. I hear by some of the comments out there that you may not have realized that. So I encourage you to go to our website and you'll probably find a lot about that particular case in some of our old freedom flyers. As an outspoken advocate of individual freedom and responsibility in all aspects of political and social life, Bob has addressed many government commissions and public hearings and written many editorials and news columns published in various newspapers. He can also be seen and heard on various TV talk shows, quite a lot actually, quite a lot, and open line radio shows in lively debate over freedom and related issues. For the past 5 years, he's hosted the weekly radio show called Just Right, broadcasting in London every Thursday on CHRW from the University of Western Ontario's campus. So please help me welcome Robert Metz.
Well, what do you know? We finally made it. It's April 21st. Getting into politics was an interesting thing for me because, I didn't understand anything about politics and about the colors. What did red mean? What did orange mean? What did blue mean? One thing I know is that it's never the color of a person's skin that matters. It's the color of his or her ideas. They do matter. And in our world of political and social ideas, the color that most people think in is red. Completely red, and most of them don't even know it. That's what we're here to talk about today. It's the same color that has led the whole world into one political disaster after another. From wars to famine to crises, red is the color of the ideas that inevitably lead to those crises. When I first ran as a candidate, believe it or not, for another party, I had no interest in politics. I did it as a favor to a friend. Sound familiar to anybody in the room here? And I didn't know left from right. I didn't know left from center. Didn't know right from center, or blue from orange, from green to red. They were all the same thing to me. In fact, I went so far as to reject all colors and all labels in this naive belief that I could avoid a label being stuck on me. I didn't want it on there. Get it off there. I'm an unparty. I'm somebody who's not on the political scale. I'm something different. That's what we thought. But I soon learned the rule. You have to define or be defined. Because if you don't define yourself, somebody else will define you for you. So that's one thing you can't avoid. And it bothers some people. I've been told this, even in advance of this dinner, to hear that not only that all the parties might be the same, but they're all red, what I call pinko commies. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to apologize for that phrase. And they say, well, aren't you going a little bit too hard on them? Or isn't that, kind of a tough thing to say because communists, they don't have a very good reputation in the world. And then my only reply to that is, well, that's what makes the red button the ideal button to push. Because those who dismiss the charge that all the parties are red do so at their own peril and ours. The other parties are red. There's nothing we can do to avoid that. And it's long past time that we took the banner and said, listen, this is their color. Because it is. Red, of course, is the color the metaphor that we use to understand, to represent what we also call the left. Liberals, New Democrats, socialists, communists, etc. But for a party like us, it's supposed to be different. We have another problem, and that's the other parties that say that they're different from the Reds. And the main one we have here in Ontario, of course, is the Conservative Party, and a few other sundry parties, who have all escaped the smear of this color due to their consistent misrepresentation of themselves as the opposition, both politically and philosophically. Since the Liberal Party already has a claim on the color red, there simply aren't enough red colors to go around for all the other parties, so they have to choose a different color to represent themselves. Conservatives disguise their red roots by using the color blue and talking about, vaguely free enterprise, privatization, all the right-sounding things that people on the right like to hear, which gives the public the false impression that the conservatives are free market capitalists, they believe in free markets, they believe in freedom, low taxes, etc., which simply does not and has never applied to the conservatives, at least in the time I've been in politics. It recently struck me, thanks, Paul, to your recent archiving of all of our newsletters online, which you can see now right from the beginning, that we have been sounding the red alert since the very first day we formed Freedom Party. Over and over again, we've been making the argument that the conservatives, the progressive no less, which is another term very explicit that says red, the red conservatives, are complete collectivists. They're no different from their political opponents. But, I can make that argument, and everybody will go, yeah, that's right. But it won't be convincing. It won't be the thing that does it. I think it's time to use their color against them, because making an argument is not enough. Now, why would we do this? Why do we want to make our enemy angry? Because I think when you use their color against them, they don't like to be identified as that. It's like putting the bullfighter in the ring, and he waves that cape in front of the bull to get him angry and get him to react. Well, that's what we can do by pushing that red button and letting them know that we know what their color is. And when you do that, here's something I want you to do. Listen well to what you will hear. You'll hear red, and you'll hear red. Two reds. The first red you'll hear is a very deeply held communistic belief. Whether they realize that or not, that's what you're going to hear. But the second red you'll hear is something a little different. It's not a bad red in itself, but the first red's the bad one. And this red is something we call anger. Red is also the color of anger. So let's hope that more people start seeing red where it actually exists. And a Red Alert campaign is an ideal way to clear that color blindness, to help direct that anger towards a non-red solution. The first one I've seen in this province or in this country, and that is Freedom Party. Otherwise, they'll keep allowing themselves to fall into that red trap of parties who simply fly false colors. You've heard the statement, those who value security more than freedom will assuredly lose both. And those who value freedom more than security will achieve both. I think that's been attributed to Benjamin Franklin, but it is as true today as it was in the days when he first uttered it. And that, in a nutshell, defines the basic difference between left and right, the great political divide. Those who believe that the purpose of government is to provide security, those are the ones we usually call left. Those who believe that the purpose of government is to ensure an environment of individual freedom are the people we usually call the right. Now, the party that most people would define as the right is the Conservative Party, and the color of that right is blue. Well, it's true that the color of conservatism is represented by blue, but ask yourself, on which side of that great divide, security or freedom, do they sit? I think you'll find that they sit very distinctly on the red side, on the liberal side, very socialist, very communist, because all of these things mean the same thing. Former PC Premier Ernie Eves, remember him? He, not once, but more than once, when challenged on it by Paul McKeever on a Toronto talk show here in Toronto, literally said, the purpose of government is to redistribute wealth. That came out of his mouth. And then what did you say, Paul? You said, well, are you sure about that? You want to repeat that? And yeah, he did. And then Paul said, well, what about freedom? And he's replied, oh yeah, that too. As if it was somehow assumed that it would always exist. Ladies and gentlemen, these two goals, freedom and security, are utterly incompatible in a red environment. Because being free of government forcibly redistributing your wealth and the wealth of those who created it is exactly what freedom means. I mean, that's what you're supposed to be free from the thieves who come and take your money. You don't hire the government to do it for them, and yet that's what we seem to be doing. But here's the secret. Security is very compatible in a free environment, and only free societies have ever achieved any true degree of security, personal or otherwise. From Jason Winders, Director of Editorial Services of Western News. This is an on-campus paper I pick up every week, every now and then when I go up to do the radio show, Just Right. Had an interesting article in the April 5th paper, Western News, and he writes, the key struggles of our society are not defined by right, left, conservative, and liberal. That might work for the cable news addicted among us who still block off their world that way. Funny, as the children of the most productive generation ever, he writes, baby boomers were handed cheap, debt-free educations, full employment, affordable housing, locked tight pensions, and a lifetime of security. What they have left for the generations after them, starting most notably with mine, Generation X, he writes, is an expensive mess, end quote. Most notably with his. The writer then goes on to praise the Occupy Wall Street movement and calls for more of the problem, including lower subsidized tuition fees for college and university students, plus continued security through a pension paid for by government. So he's in the trap. He's put himself in that trap, and this is what we have to warn ourselves not to do, not to put ourselves in the trap and not to let anybody else fall in that trap because of his own self-admitted false assumption that the distinctions between left and right, between red, blue, orange, black, and white do not matter. All that matters is who gets to be a taker and who is the maker from who gets taken from. The major thing, of course, that he's failed to recognize is not that right and left are not workable definitions, but that everything being called left, right, center, red, blue, green, orange, pink, you name it, they're all red, and there's no black and white difference between them, and there's no black and white on the scene, or a right on the scene anywhere. Which is why to him, and to so many others, the parties all look the same. Because they are. Hello, anybody at home? Anybody listening? Because that's exactly what's going on, and it's particularly true on the campus. On university campuses, where the government-financed tuitions, he advocates, can only lead to red in the field of philosophy and of politics. Conservatives and liberals see themselves as being different from one another, but they're both explicitly statist, red in their outlooks, and they differ only in how they violate the rights of their citizens. And here's what happens when the public becomes colorblind. They have no way of knowing which direction to turn, because for them, there's no way to distinguish, not just left from right, but right from wrong, which leaves them helpless and without a solution. Because they're not even looking for a solution anymore unless that solution continues some entitlement, which is the only way they know how to measure anything. That's the only thing they can measure against. So how come nobody saw this crisis coming? I mean, didn't anybody see it? Well, yeah, they did, but if you're counting on security from government, you not only won't be able to see the crisis, you won't want to even know that there's a crisis coming. And you can see this phenomenon at play right down to the ultimate meltdown, such as what we're seeing in Greece today. There they are melting down, and you don't see any abatement of that. Or in Queen's Park today with Sid Ryan leading the Red Brigade to self-destruction downtown today. Hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. Just be it. Because that's what happens when you refuse to hear, speak, and see evil. You can't identify it anymore. Back in 2003, Freedom Party leader Paul McKeever literally predicted in a televised interview with Jim Chapman in London, you can see it online, it's on our homepage right now, right, Paul? The mass exodus of employers from Ontario, even the failing power system and grid that we had subsequent to his interview. You can go back all the way to 1984 when Freedom Party first came into being and see our literature at the time, and particularly a piece we wrote and called "We're In for a Shock" with Ontario Hydro. The massive fraud that was being perpetrated on Ontarians was already clearly visible to us back then, but only to those who had the moral courage to state the obvious, which has never been the Liberals, the Conservatives, or the New Democrats. Which brings us to the philosophy of political parties and political action. To once again paraphrase Benjamin Franklin, those who value votes more than principles will surely lose both. Those who value principles more than votes will surely gain both. Most people don't believe this, I know that. And I know most people are wrong. Of that I have no doubts whatsoever. But I'm not going to waste any time trying to convince them. I gave that up a long time ago. Because my only weapons that I have are the facts, rationality, and reason applied to a specific objective and goal. And those who believe in votes before principles are simply not vote motivated by these virtues. They just aren't. Their goal is immediate gratification, not some future permanence that extends beyond the immediate. It's not a failure to understand, it's a refusal to know, because such knowledge destroys the base of a lot of false beliefs and forces upon them a choice to act or not to act, to be or not to be. People who don't want to be judged are those who are most afraid of hearing that some things are black and white. It's a bit like having a priest or minister in the room. You ever felt that discomfort? And what's a priest usually wear? Black cassock, white collar. People are uncomfortable around black and white because they instinctively know that people able to think in black and white terms, the fundamentals, the essentials, can see right through them. Or as Lord Christopher Monckton told Robert and I the other day, they can tell when they see the rot, right? Or worse, they can see the red that is truly so close to their hearts. So what's the color of freedom? Black and white? No. Freedom doesn't have a color. There's some bad news for us, eh? Because it is clear. It's transparent. It lets the light shine through. The clarity that is provided by recognizing that some things are black and white. There are no colored lenses through which to view the world. No colored agendas that serve interests and not rights. And that's where we're at today. We have to have and provide an agenda of a different color. And most people don't even know that they're in the Red Sea. So what have we accomplished with Freedom Party up till this point, from 1984 till now, and indeed, mostly what happened in the last few years since we've set ourselves on this very black and white direction? We have every single critical component in place that any political party could ever want. All the basic components are there: a constitution, a statement of principles, policies, platforms, planks, a website second to none, a powerful online presence in every medium, print, audio, visual, a growing network of influential contacts both here and abroad. We have an executive whose prime function it is to protect and assure that the statement of principles is not violated, and a party leader who's ready to lead in a clearly defined direction in which we intend to move towards freedom, not away from it. Heard Tim Hudak the other day. This was funny. Ours isn't a revenue problem, it's a spending problem, he says. I hear that a lot. You hear what Sid Ryan said in the park today? Ours isn't a spending problem, it's a revenue problem. Now, these two people probably think they're saying something different from each other. But they're just two sides of the same fiscal coin of bankruptcy. Two shades of the same color, red. You can't separate spending from your income if you've got a deficit or a debt. It's the difference between the two that makes it, not which is more and which is less and where the power is. It's the same coin. And in the collective panic to avoid the inevitable crashes and disasters that result from thinking red, most voters continue to choose red even though it might not be the color they think they're looking at. Some climb aboard the red balloon of liberalism. Some climb aboard the green balloon, some on the blue Tory balloon. And still others ride on the orange balloon of the NDP. But all of them are drifting along in the same red wind. We have a new choice now. See, it says so right there. We can hop on any number of colored balloons, all being carried by a red wind towards the fires of socialism and communism, or we can climb aboard the train to freedom, which sits on a track, pulled by a locomotive pointed in the right direction and incapable of changing direction because that track has already been laid towards a clearly defined destination. And even if that train only moves an inch in a given period, or in a year, or in a campaign, at least it's moved an inch in the right direction, and not miles in the wrong direction. The red wind cannot move the locomotive, which has the power to move through the headwind undeterred. And that's why Ontarians, they need and they deserve a real choice. They need a true opposition party with a leader who's ready to lead today. And they have one. It's Freedom Party. And our plan now is to force the knowledge of our existence into the traditional media via paid advertising. We have to seize every opportunity to create our own media sources. We have to prepare for the next election. We need volunteers, candidates, organizers. Members and financial supporters are always the essentials of such an effort. That's the track we're on, and we've never strayed from it. You can join us on our journey in the right direction with your continued support, with your continued involvement and your continued interest. We call it Freedom Party because some things are black and white. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.